You're listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. This is the show that talks about identity and access management and making sure you know who has access to what. Let's get started. Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
I'm good. I'm not going to complain about the heat wave. I live in Georgia, and it's hot for like 4 months straight. So to me, I know a lot of the folks I'm talking to from around the country are like, oh my God, it's so hot. But to me, it's like, it's just another day of hot.
Yeah. It's I'm in now the mountains of western North Carolina. It's not quite as hot, which is kind of nice. Still humid, but surviving. I think the heat wave has been like all over the world basically. You know, like England had issues. I think it was last week or maybe it was earlier this week. I don't know, time's flying at this point.
Yeah, right. The big thing I've been working on this week is kind of coming up with a conference plan for the group that I'm in. And really, you know, obviously you've got the opportunities, like business development opportunities that come from conferences. But on top of that, of course, there's the training aspect, you know, go there and receive training. And I think the third thing that doesn't get enough attention is that it's really like a reward, almost like a retention kind of aspect to conferences. Like if you bring folks to conferences or let folks go to conferences, they see it as, you know, they're being rewarded or they're being recognized as somebody who's worthy of being invested in. What do you think?
I feel like we talked about this a few weeks back. Generally, I want to agree with you. There are some people who don't like going to conferences and might see it as a punishment. So I could see it as a two-sided coin. I think it just depends on the individual and, you know, why are you going there? I think my attendance at conferences has changed over the years. It used to be for learning. Now it's less so. It's more networking and, you know, business development and sort of things like that. I kind of wish it was, you know, more focused sometimes on the learning side, but you get so busy at these conferences going from one meeting to the next to another that I'm at least personally, I'm finding less and less time to actually kind of sit down and actually listen and enjoy the content live. I generally have to catch it after the fact.
So, I mean, during the pandemic, we were attending conferences virtually. I did that myself. You know, what I found was a lot of times I couldn't stay focused on the conference the entire day. So, you know, especially knowing that sessions would be available for later viewing, I felt like the training and learning side of it was enhanced because you could really focus on it, but that everything else was not nearly as good.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, the hallway conversations, just, you know, seeing people and faces and voices that you recognize, you know, that whole stuff definitely disappeared. I mean, it's back. I was at RSA earlier this year. Missed the Denver's because I was moving, and then we're going to be at Gartner in a few weeks. So I'm looking forward to that as well. But it's back, man. I think people are just sort of like, we're just going to move forward now unless something happens to kind of move things backwards. But I don't see that happening.
No, I don't think so. So as you mentioned, we're heading out to the Gartner conference and hoping to up our podcast game a little bit. What are your thoughts there?
I think, yes, upping the game will be a challenge as usual, but we're starting from zero, so anything is an improvement. We are actually still looking for a place to record while we're out there. We actually tried to go the Gartner route, and that was not successful in finding a spot that we could set up camp at. So if there's any friends of the show out there that have like a breakout room or something that's convenient within the conference space in Las Vegas, reach out. We'd love to figure out how maybe we could share some of that space with you, at least for some of the time, because we are definitely looking to do some podcasting and get some guests, and, you know, maybe even hopefully if we can get enough people, you know, 1, 2, or 3 people that want to watch how the sausage is made, so to speak. That's certainly an option as well. But as of right now, I feel like it's going to be you and me holding these little microphones and accosting people in hallways or trying to find like little cubby holes that we can do things in. I guess we could try to look for like a suite or something like that at Caesars, but that's nowhere near as convenient. So that's kind of like a fallback plan right now. It's like, hey, we'd love to have a show. We want you to walk half an hour across this casino up into this suite, and then, spend an hour there, or 45 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever it is, and then walk another half hour back to the show. It's not the same. So we're looking at options. And
then again, we can't really record at the roulette table or at Starbucks or anything like that.
Yeah, there's some rules about recording in public spaces and things like that. But
I wasn't even thinking about that. I just were more thinking about the noise.
The noise. Yeah. Oh, trust me, I was thinking about it too. But yeah, so if you're a friend of the show, or not even a friend of the show, but you have a lead on some breakout space that might be in the conference area, or even something similar, reach out to us on LinkedIn. We'd be happy to discuss and figure out if there's an option there that we can do something together to take advantage of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's Gartner. I think we're also looking at Octane coming up in the future, which is in November. So yeah, we're sort of getting our conference circuit, back on a track after a couple of years here of hiatus.
Yeah, I've never actually been to Octane. I think I was supposed to go to it the first year of the pandemic, so obviously that didn't happen. But it should be a fantastic conference, and again, hopefully we can set new records in terms of, putting the podcast out with a great frequency, maybe 5-6 episodes in a week. I don't know. I'm just putting some crazy ideas out there.
Work on my plate.
It's mostly work on your plate, but hey, the scheduling side is not so easy.
Yeah, that's true.
Especially, I don't know if you've seen your calendar lately, but it's a disaster.
Well, everybody knows, right? Just because you're traveling or you're taking time off or whatever it may be, the work doesn't disappear. It just shifts from one area of your calendar to another. So, yeah, my calendar was crazy earlier this week. Today's been a little bit lighter, so I've been kind of able to catch up on some things. But yeah, availability is always a challenge in this crazy world. But why don't we get to our topic? Because I actually kind of interested in several of the things we're going to talk about today. So actually, this entire show is basically formed around one tweet from an individual named Chris Power, who tweeted us a few days back with a bunch of topic suggestions. So we're kind of going to go through somewhat of a surgery, as you kind of put it, as we're kind of preparing here for the show, to kind of dissect at least what we think some of the questions were that he tweeted out, or she, I guess I'm not sure.
No, it's he.
Is it? Okay. What we think the intent is behind the question, and kind of work through that. So
yeah,
this is
Chris's
a show built around one
defense,
tweet.
In Chris's defense, Twitter limits us to 140 characters, and he wanted to ask like 10 questions in one tweet, and so yeah. He got
Twitter's money's worth for sure on this tweet. I think there's like 6 or 7 questions in here that we'll try to address.
Yeah.
But why don't we just dive right into it? So, Chris, if you're listening, this one's for you. Hopefully others get value out of it too. If you do have questions, definitely tweet them at us. We will try to build an episode around it, or weed them into other episodes that we're working through. But here we go. All right. So, topic suggestions: manual extracts management, more or less job roles, how to build admin intelligence, or IAI, managing audit expectations, provisioning outside of SailPoint, in parentheses, third-party apps, validating extracts, and he says he's got more if wanted. All right, well, let's start with the first one. Let's talk through manual extracts management. First of all, what do you think he's referring to with that statement?
Well, just judging on the tweet overall, I think Chris might be a SailPoint user, right? And so I'm guessing, yeah. So I'm kind of thinking of it from a SailPoint architecture perspective. There's multiple ways to integrate with applications, and one way is kind of the quote unquote disconnected application. And so in that disconnected application, you could work simply with like file feeds to, or file extracts to take them into SailPoint and build, the data for the access catalog or for an access recertification. So, I've always referred to this as the least common denominator integration. So in other words, just like there's no reason you can't integrate into SailPoint from your application. Even if it's like the legacy of the legacy, you should be able to export a flat file, comma delimited or tab delimited or what have you. And so what I think Chris is getting at here is like, how do you put a whole framework or process around that? And to me, it kind of starts off with kind of trying to put some rules to the road in terms of what the format of that file should be, when it should be uploaded, where it should be uploaded, things like that. Ideally, there's not an opportunity for humans to touch the file. So, in other words, the file's being created on the system. So, say we're talking about a mainframe and it's being, somehow FTP'd or transferred to your file share. So, a lot of times, what I've seen corporations do is they'll set up a SharePoint or a OneDrive and have files put on that OneDrive. Now, typically, what I've seen is that a human being like pulls the file and moves it, but the more often you're doing that, the more likely it is that you're going to create some automation around it. So, I would say, just keep that in your back pocket. That even if you're doing just quarterly attestations or even annual attestations, try to ramp up the frequency of that upload so that you start to drive the idea of automation of getting those files uploaded. But a lot of times this is where you're starting to get into the wild west of your IT environment, and you're just happy to have something. So again, it's kind of like setting up the policy for what those extracts should be like, how they get uploaded, things like that. And then I think the other thing that a lot of times what you need is like some kind of translation of the file. Like, what is it? What are these columns that are in the file? What do they signify in the application? Because ultimately you're going to design a campaign around the user data that's in those files.
Yeah, I like that analogy of the Wild West because I feel like this is like the frontier. You're building an outpost. You're not sure what's going to come in the door. So I think I agree with you. I think this is probably talking about those disconnected systems, so to speak, that are not using like a formal connector, right, to like read the data directly. I think part of the question that he also asked later is like validation of extracts. He talked about, what version of the file or file type is it coming in? CSV, some other version. What are the expected data attributes and values? Is it Boolean? Is it a string? What kind of string it may be, like those sorts of things. I think this is where coordination with whoever is extracting that data, you're working with them to make sure that you're getting the data back in a format that is parsable. I think this is also an area where, I think historically it would be done manually, where someone would pick up the file from a SharePoint or a OneDrive or any other file share and then run like an import into, for example, your IDAC tool. Let's call it SailPoint in this case, because I think that's what we're talking about here. I see more RPA now, robotic process automation, picking up a lot of this stuff and doing some of that work for you. So there might be some opportunities to say, okay, well, you talked about like this integration pattern. Like the lowest common denominator, as you refer to, was, okay, well, at least let's just get an extract of data so we can make our IGA platform at least aware of what's out there. Can't really do anything with it, but at least it's aware of it, right? And if you can leverage some sort of RPA to ingest that for you automatically, if you can't do it, through the platform itself, then that might be sort of another. Is there a lower list common denominator to automate some of that steps? But I think you're really kind of looking again at that Wild West. It's like you're not sure what's coming thing. If that's all you have left from like an integration standpoint, you're probably doing pretty well, like from a SailPoint perspective, let's just call it, or any IGA perspective, is if you're down to just systems that there are not connectors for. That's a problem that I think a lot of people would love to have because that means they probably moved pretty far down the maturity scale and gotten a lot of their, bigger, maybe more well-known applications that do have connectors, set up. I guess the alternative could be you've got some sort of like group that just for whatever reason doesn't want to play ball, be part of the IAM program and be part of the IGA platform, whatever it looks like. That's probably more of a political battle, but that's kind of what I'm thinking from that perspective.
Yeah, that last point that you brought up is something in my experience of working with SailPoint architects. almost every time, if I was in like an advisory role, is like, we are not doing flat file imports. They're such a pain in the butt. And I think that's getting to the part of the question where Chris asked about validation. Like, imagine a comma separated value where you got the person's name and it's comma MD or comma PhD or something like that. And they like broke the file, and now you have to figure out like what's causing the file to break, and you're trying to automate this whole process. And what if you have 100 applications that are doing this? And what if you're getting those extracts on a regular basis? Now, I'm sure somebody's sitting out there saying, well, then, throw parentheses, or not parentheses, but quotes around all the data or something like that. And I'm sure somebody's got like a best practice, but if you can find a way to break it, somebody's out there breaking it. I guess what I was also thinking is, where these can be valuable is one of the big selling points of having an IGA system is building truly a depot of one place to go to know who has access to what. And that's, when you use that statement, it's like, to who has access to what? It means everything. Like, what's all the access they have? Well, if you're in a big enterprise with thousands of applications, that's a lot of applications, right? And so if you get one place to go to know who has access to our top 125 applications, that's not really as compelling as who has access to all of our data, right? Or all of our data that is of some relevance. And so there's got to be some velocity in terms of, when you implement one of these systems, getting all of your applications integrated. And so, flat files, while I don't like them either, to me, it's better if you could, just set up a connector to hit a relational database and pull the data from the database, because I think that the point then is that you run into much fewer of these errors. But if that's not available, or to the point that you're making, because this I've been seeing as long as I've been in as long as I've been in IT, there's some people who just don't want to play nice. They just don't want to be bothered by what you're doing because their job is way too important. They can't have you screwing around with their system. But if you just need a file dumped on a FTP site, yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, sometimes that file is sort of like the first step. You might do that initially with the goal of eventually using a connector, or maybe that system gets deprecated or is no longer strategic to the organization, goes away, but not the ideal way that I would look at integration. I think, at that point, maybe the question is the juice worth the squeeze? Is it something you really want to spend time on? Or are there other things that maybe provide more value? That could be another way to look at it too. So, all right, let's move on to the next one. It is more or less job roles. I certainly have an opinion on this one. What do you think, Jim?
No, I think what we decided beforehand was that we are going to go every other one. So now it's your turn to go first. So let's hear that opinion. First. Then I get to leverage some of your answer.
All right. I like to keep things simple. So I am more of a fan of less job roles, at least to start with. I prefer more of an attribute-based approach too, and having more roles, but more consistent roles. So what I mean by that is taking a few attributes from like your authoritative source. I'm an employee in North Carolina. I almost said Chicago. Old habits will die. An employee in North Carolina, and I work in information security. Those three attributes might drive three different roles that give me what I need. If I change, maybe I am an employee who moves back to Chicago, but I still stay in information security. Two of those attributes stay the same. And maybe that third attribute that was controlling other access changes as well. So I prefer less job roles themselves because I feel like they're pretty volatile and it's a lot of work to keep them up to date, especially the coordination that needs to go along with what happens if you have shared job titles between different groups. An analyst in one group might be different than an analyst in another, support, whatever it may be. And the coordination that you have to also have with whoever is the owner of the authoritative source, typically like HR or maybe finance, if maybe it's contractors or non-employees involved, right? Things like that. So I'd rather keep things simple, at least to start. Again, I think this is another area where like a lot of organizations say they want to be, fully role-based. access control in place. And it's really hard to do, especially if you don't have good data and good tools to actually make it happen. All right, your turn.
Okay. I'm going to generally agree with you. Fewer is better. I'm going to, put a spin on it, which is that, I've been involved with kind of building an RBAC from the ground up. And so to me, and this is my opinion, I think that there's so many folks out there who have experience with roles and have a different perspective. But to me, it's you want to start out with what can we grant access to automatically. So when we onboard somebody, can we create their AD account? Can we put them in the right groups based on attributes in their identity data authoritative file? So, for an employee, it's going to be an HR system, or for a non-employee, it might be some other system. But if there's data attributes there, or even if you're creating them in your IGA system, but identifying those attributes that you can key off of, like they're in Chicago, so they have access to the Chicago lunch menu. And that's our silly example we always point to, but the idea being that they're you can onboard somebody, give them email accounts, give them VPN. I'm sorry, were you wanting to say something? Oh, okay.
No, I was just laughing at the lunch menu example. Just we always use it all the time, but
yeah,
I want to say for the record, I am pro lunch.
Yeah, everybody should have lunch. So, all right, I think that's a starting point. I think then on top of it, one of my other major rules drivers is that the business has to own the roles. They have to get behind the roles. That doesn't mean they have to create them in a silo or create them without IT's help, but they can't be so disconnected from the process that they don't have any skin in the game. And so that's where I start to dial it back to, identifying somebody in a business department, say finance or say HR, who understands enough about technology to be dangerous or is involved with the provisioning of users that they work with your IT roles administrator, your IGA roles administrator to design the roles. And then I think the area where you start is where you have people who basically do the same thing. So if you have something like a call center, or you have something like, people who do nursing. Now, all nurses don't do the same job, as I've learned from working with healthcare clients, but they have a lot of the same responsibilities. You need access to the same systems. So there may be a baseline nursing role, and then based on the type of nurse they are, it can branch off from there. But even if you take that 80-20 perspective, and that was the other thing I was going to say, is I think you need to take an 80-20 perspective. Like roles isn't going to get you to 100% automation of access assignment. At least I've never seen it anywhere come even close to 100%. So if you kind of come to a point where you're saying, we're trying to get to a point where we've either automated or simplified the access assignment for 80% of the access that needs to be provisioned, you win. You win big time. And so to me, focus on people that do the same job or do portions of the job the same. Don't focus on like IT administrators and folks like that. They're so hard to get a role for that. Basically, you're going to have one role per person, and then you lose.
It sounds to me like we agree for the most part. Keep it simple. Yeah. Less is more. 80-20. All right, let's move on. The next one, I'll be honest, this one had me a little bit stumped. I wasn't quite sure, but it's how to build admin intelligence, or IAI.
Okay.
And then you and I were talking, I was like, well, maybe there's something to do with like intelligence within specifically like the IGA platform, maybe SailPoint. What are you inferring from this question?
Yeah, I mean, this is like over the past few years, this is an area where the IGA platforms have really invested to start to try to differentiate their products. And from an intelligence standpoint, I think a lot of the focus has been put on trying to predictively either assign or recommend access be assigned to certain people. So in other words, hey, you're assigning access to Jeff. We see that everybody else who's on the security and privacy team also has access to X, Y, and Z application. Do you want to go ahead and give it to Jeff as well? So in other words, it somehow is analyzing the data to make these predictions and make things, using artificial intelligence to make sure that Jeff has the access he needs. I think that the best way to kind of go about building that is, well, I think, from the first standpoint, this is very product specific. This is something that products are using to differentiate themselves. So it's proprietary. I think you have to look at what the vendor is recommending in terms of what their product can do and how to configure it. I think, in terms of best practices, for me, it's like dip your toe in the water, like enter into this area slowly, because what you don't want to have happen is artificial intelligence, which is essentially a computer program, kind of deciding who should get what access, when somebody's access should be taken away, because then you don't even really know. You're getting much further away from that kind of ITIL ticket-based methodology, and you're trusting a computer program that you don't really know how it works behind the scenes to decide who gets what access. And I think most audit groups wouldn't really like that, and I don't think I would feel comfortable with that either.
Yeah, I think if this is the direction you're going down, AI, for example, it's only as good as the data that you're giving it, and it's only as good as the AI model that's built around. I think generally right now I am relatively skeptical that this stuff actually works in the real world in the way that vendors portray that it will. I think a lot of the times it's based on sort of this ideal state of, oh, we have all of our systems connected, all of our data is clean, all of our users are in our sources. And I think anybody who's been in identity for more than 10 minutes probably realizes that that's not true the majority of the time. I'm skeptical. Let me just leave it at that. I think it's a data point to be used by somebody to then help decide whether that information is valid as part of the decision-making process. I don't think we're yet at the spot where it is completely hands-off and, we're letting, some Agent Smith run around inside your IGA system, making decisions on who has access to what. That is definitely not what I've seen out there. It's generally more of a tool to be able to say, okay, well, we're trying to build roles and we see that 80% of the people have this access, or hey, 100% of the people in your team have access to this thing. We think it's okay. Like stuff like that, maybe add some value, but again, it's only as good as the data that's coming into it. And it should just be part of the decision-making process, not the decision-making process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the one thing that I'm going to, sitting here thinking about it, the one area where I think artificial intelligence could really help is kind of that key model, which is where you're analyzing what access that an account has and how much they're using that access. So in other words, because to me, authorizations are kind of like that next frontier of the attack surface. So now if I look at Jeff's account and he has 500 authorizations via the roles that he's in, but over the past 12 months, he's only used 200 of them. Well, then I have an over-provisioned account, most likely. So
yeah, I can see that. Like that's interesting to me. Like you're using really behavior analytics, right, to sort of enrich the notification process. I actually have a pretty good real life example of this. Is I have an iPhone, I have an Apple Watch, and over the last few weeks, since I've moved from the Chicago area, which is relatively flat, to Western North Carolina, which is the opposite, very hilly, Apple is telling me, hey, you're doing a lot more stair climbing than you normally do. I am. I'm walking up a lot of hills compared to what I used to do. And I think that sort of trend indicator might be helpful from an analyst perspective to say, hey, that is that is interesting. What do we do about that? And I think that's an area that, you and I have been talking about for years. We've seen sort of players in the space like Exabeam, for example, and other sort of this, what people call like this SIM 2.0, that is taking these signals and surfacing up to platforms to be able to make decisions with, right? We see this a little bit in the access management platform where the impossible travel scenario. Well, Jeff just logged in from Chicago, and then 3 minutes later he logs in from North Carolina. That doesn't make any sense. Let's do something about it. Throw up an MFA prompt or some other challenge, whatever that looks like. The same thing could be done from a identity governance perspective or a privileged access management perspective, where you're taking those sorts of data and you're leveraging AI to spot those trends and do something with it. Even if it's just surfacing it up in a ticket, that's better than it being lost in some sort of log somewhere that no one looks at for 6 months, and then by then it's too late.
Yeah. Part of what my concern is with this AI is like the teams that I think would get the most benefit from it are the ones who are the most vulnerable to what if it goes haywire. So, my concern is a lot of the companies that have scaled back the size of their teams. It's like, oh yeah, that's where using AI to get more efficient would be really helpful. But they get further and further away from actually knowing how the system works. And so to me, it's a little bit of a scary combination, but also counterbalance that with the fact that more and more of these things are moving to the cloud, and you have even less intelligence about what's going on behind the curtain. Truly, as a software as a service, it's like these are proprietary systems; they're not open source. You don't always know how they're working behind the scenes, and you're in kind of a trust model that that system is going to stay secure, and it's secure until it's not, I guess.
yeah, everything designed by humans is going to have flaws in it. So I want to bridge that part of the AI and being able to explain it with the managing audit expectations, because one of the things that I think about is like, okay, well, we're leveraging, hey auditor, we're leveraging AI to do these things for us. And then the next question I would have at an auditor is, okay, tell me how your AI works. Can you actually explain it, right? The algorithms, is it documented, things like that? Are you going to be able to produce the evidence that your AI is actually effective at making those decisions? And I think that goes along with sort of the question next on the list was managing audit expectations, which is definitely near and dear to my heart from a former operations side of things. I will go first as we kind of go back and forth here. I think this is, let's start with managing audit expectations. The first one I think is you have to have a relationship with your auditors. You cannot just treat them at arm's length as like the cops and they come in and check you and you're the bad guys. More generally speaking, most auditors, especially the internal auditors, are the check before the external auditors come in. It is much better to have things found from an internal audit perspective than from an external audit perspective. So if you've got the relationships there, that is helpful. I think the other thing too is, at least in my experience, is that audit doesn't actually tell you what to do. They are there to check on what you say you are going to do or whatever you've documented from a process, procedure, whatever it might be, to validate that what you're doing from a process perspective is actually what's taking place in real life. Now, you could argue they might find that a process is ineffective, and then you have to update the process or whatever it may be. But in the organizations that I've been a part of and worked with, generally speaking, audit is merely an advisor. They advise on risk and they say, okay, here is what we think should be taking place, but it's still up to the business to make a decision on what they want to do about that risk. And a lot of times what you'll see is, an audit findings document that has the auditor, the audit, whatever finding that they say they have. And then there's like this blank spot called management response. I've written enough of these in the past where it's like, okay, they're just telling me what the problem is or what they see as the problem. Now it's up to me as the person who's going to write that management response to say, here's what we're going to do to fix it, or here's why I don't think that it is a risk, and we will focus on other things instead. So I think understanding those expectations and making sure that the auditors understand what they're, what it is that they're looking at, because sometimes you do have to help them. They may not be as, 100% identity or 100% tool based, whatever that may be, is making sure that they understand how the platform works, whatever you're doing from an identity perspective, and how the processes work, and bringing them into the fold. I like to include them as part of program management, as part of rolling things out. I think they're a key stakeholder when it comes to designing how services work. You want to make it audit friendly and audit compliant as much as possible up front, rather than trying to do that stuff later. So sometimes it makes sense to invite them to a steering meeting, or invite them into a vendor demonstration of a tool they might be considering, right? Let them ask their questions as well, and help provide some of their input. I think that's an easy way to help sort of get them into the fold and help manage those expectations.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, and I think that the way you're talking about that, the way you're addressing it, you're talking about internal audit, external audit. Some organizations have bigger, more complex structures, like they have IT risk, that those are your teammates, right? They're the ones who are to advise you in terms of how to pass the audit. I'm going to throw out another perspective, which is that I think the audit process that I see most of the time is very reactive. In other words, it's assessing how things are done, and then inspecting the data, looking for controls that are broken, and identifying those, and then going after. So in other words, if they don't find bad data, or they don't find an exception to it, then the control works fine. So to me, that's kind of like, that's not necessarily the spirit of what you're trying to achieve. What these regulations are trying to achieve is that you've got a more secure environment, not just that you pass the audit. And so here's an example where I see that. So around user experience, and what we talk a lot about with user experience when it comes to the detective control of reviewing access, is that sometimes people get overwhelmed. It's like, here's your 50 users that report to you, and their 400 entitlements each that they have, and they're named XYZ123, and the manager's like, I'm afraid to take away access for this person, because what if they can't do their job? Last time I tried to get somebody access, it took 10 days. There's no way I'm going to take access away unless the person's left the organization. So I'm just going to approve everything, i.e. what we call a rubber stamp. And I mean, how many clients do we go into that are like, yeah, rubber stamping is a problem. Do you get audited? Yeah, we get audited. Do you pass your audits? Yeah, we pass our audits. So in other words, even though you have a broken process, you pass your audit. So that's part of my perspective. I wanted to bring up one other thing, which is I see some identity governance tools that are kind of early in their maturity, which I think are focused more on organizations that maybe don't have as steep of a compliance curve to overcome. And so what I'm getting at by that, like if you think back to very early in our IT careers, the way that audit evidence would take place is that the administrator would take screenshots of the user list, or they'd print it out on, the dot matrix printer, and and then they'd scan it in. That would be the evidence that would end up in somebody's email box to say, yes, those are the right people. Or they'd actually physically write notes. I mean, I know this, I'm making it sound like a dinosaur, but that is, so essentially what that was coming from is that what we're auditing is not what your single sign-on system says that people have access to, or your IGA system says people have access to. We're talking about what the source system has. Now, if you can prove to me that nobody can access that system unless they go through your single sign-on system, or that the data in your IGA system is airtight, that nobody could have deleted a few accounts, then okay, maybe I can go with that. But for the most part, we're trying to get to the system of record, which is the endpoint system. And if there's accounts there that aren't on your system, like service accounts, for example, the audit has to be done of that data, of the data on the system, not on your central IAM system. So I don't know that every audit department looks at it like, that black and white, like I'm talking about. But to me, that's really what you're auditing. What you should be auditing is the system where the data exists.
Yeah, I'm chuckling to myself because I remember a very long time ago sitting with an auditor and they were asking me to prove a negative. Show me that this account does not exist. Okay, I run a search in ADAC. Not found. Well, do you have any proof that that's not found? Like, it's not found. It's not there. What do you want me to do about it? Like, and I had to take screenshots of, it was like a sample of like onboarding or offboarding. So it's like, oh, I got a sample of 50 people. Take screenshots of 50 searches showing that the account is not there. I always got a chuckle out of that.
That's one of those.
Made me laugh while you were talking.
To be or not to be, that is the question.
Exactly. All right, let's get to the last one on his tweet, and that is provisioning outside of SailPoint third-party apps. Your turn to go first.
All right. So what I think he's getting at here is like, what is the best practice for handling provisioning when you can't automate the provisioning? So there is a scenario where a lot of IGA systems have kind of a ticketing management system within themselves for the purposes of creating a ticket to IT administrators to go create that access, and then they're supposed to close that ticket when they are done. Maybe they're posting some evidence that they did the work. Usually not, from what I've seen. To me, the best practice is creating a ticket in the ITSM system. And the reason I say that is usually when, let's say we're onboarding somebody, right? And they get 6 accesses and 5 of them are systems that we automate. The 6th one is a system where it's some Linux application and an account needs to be manually provisioned. And so ultimately, the Linux administrator is the person that is going to have to go and create that account and assign the entitlements and everything. They don't only do, they're not waiting around for these tickets to come through. They're doing all kinds of work, and they manage their work in an ITSM system usually. And so when you create a ticket for them in their ITSM system, it gets in their queue with all the other work that they have to do. And now in terms of priority, it might come to the top or go to the bottom, whatever. But to me, that's why you want to put it there, is like, you don't want there to be one other place they have to check to see if they have work or to, stack all the work that they have to do. It'd be preferable that they clock all their work in the ITSM system and that their IAM tests are in there as well. So I think that's what Chris is asking about there.
Yeah, and have one spot to go. I think to have that provisioning track makes sense. I'm not a fan of using the built-in ticketing, that or process that might be built on the IGA platform, unless that's the only thing you have. I think you're better off strategically leveraging whatever your IT standard is, ServiceNow, Sharewell, Freshdesk, whatever it might be, like that sort of approach. I think the other thing that I will add onto this is it could be a scenario where you've got these third-party apps. They might be like a SaaS-based app, and you don't have a connection, for example, from SailPoint. What you could do is if you have a relatively modern access management tool, something like an Okta or an Azure, is you could leverage them to do the provisioning to that third-party app. Maybe it's controlled via an Active Directory group, or maybe it is a entitlement within the Okta Universal Directory or something like that. You basically stage the account into one of those directories via SailPoint, and then you let the access management tool that has probably the appropriate SaaS connector to that app to then facilitate the provisioning of that through the same process. So you're kind of like chaining your lifecycle management from IGA to the access management platform to do that as well. So that could be an option as well. Hopefully we're inferring some of the appropriate context out of this from a tweet, which is always dangerous, but we're giving it our best.
Yeah, I'm sure Chris will follow up after he hears the episode and let us know how much we got. I mean, hey, if we 80-20, if we got 4 out of 5, I'm happy.
Yeah, I'm happy if we got half of them right. So I'll set the bar a little bit lower for us. Okay, so I think that really kind of covered everything from his tweet, which is really cool. I love to get like stuff like this because Jim and I can ramble on about anything, but we'd rather talk about stuff that people actually have questions about. So thanks, Chris, for sending that tweet out. If you've got questions and you're listening, drop them in a tweet, send them to us via LinkedIn. We're happy to kind of, like I said, build a show around it. Anything you want to bring up around anything that we talked about so far before we start to close things out?
No, I'm kind of excited to get into this lighter note question. I actually,
Right.
I had because I'm new with my company, I had an introduction and I was supposed to come up with a lighter note question for everybody else. And
Yeah, you messed
instead,
that one up.
I messed it up. I thought that there was going to be a lighter note question presented to me and I was going to answer it. So the question I asked the group that I came up with on the fly was, what's your favorite podcast? And we got some really good answers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for those who have missed it, Jim and I are working together again, both part of RSM's identity practice. So come seek us out if you need help with something. But yeah, we have like a thing we do when we have people who start, they have like to give like a little intro for themselves. And I remember looking at that slide you were working with Ben, and it was completely blank. And he's like, "No, you were supposed to come up with the question."
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, I got it now.
Fortunately, it wasn't like a real mind bender kind of event.
Right. All right, let's get to the lighter note. So here's the scenario. They're making a movie about your life, Jim. What actor would you want to play you in that movie?
Yeah. So, Jeff, you've known me for a little while, and you know that one of the things that's happened to me since I was a very young person was people would always say, do you have a twin brother? Because you look exactly like ... And based on my different looks that I've had throughout my life, it would change. For a while there,
You've had a few different looks too. I've only known you for 7 or 8 years at this point, and I know 2 of those looks.
I changed my look like I changed my look like every 2 years when I was younger. Go from long hair to short hair, facial hair, no facial hair, different hairstyles, things like that. Anyway, it used to be Kid Rock, and then it was Bradley Cooper from A Star Is Born, and I've gotten you look like Aquaman. Jason Momoa.
Jason Momoa.
Yeah,
I don't. Okay, that one I don't see at all. I'm sorry.
Well, I know. I feel like even embarrassed saying that one. Right? I'm like I don't look anything like him, but I had at least 3 people say it, and I think what it is like, I have longer hair, facial hair, and I work out, and so people are like, oh. Yeah, you're a long-haired guy who works out. You look like Jason Momoa. That's what he's like. That's how he looks. But the most recent one I got was Goldberg, and that one I was just like, no, I don't see it. But everybody sees what they see, and so anyway,
I could see the Goldberg maybe if you like shaved your head and your beard, but then I think that kind of like defeats some of the purpose.
I'm going to go with Jason Momoa, though, even though I don't look like him. The question was like, who would you have play you? And I like that one. I'm going with that.
I feel like it's going to be one of those movies where it's like, why did they cast this person? Like that person doesn't look like anything like them. And maybe, not to say that Jason Momoa is not a great actor. I enjoy his work, blah, blah, blah. But I'm just not seeing it, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Sorry.
I think as far as myself, I don't get anything like that. Like I don't look like anybody else, I guess for better or for worse. I don't know if that's good or bad, but no one's ever said, hey, you look like so-and-so. And I've had relatively consistent look now for like 30 years. I used to have long hair when I was younger, but it's been pretty short since my, I guess, early 20s or late teens. So I don't know who would play me. I would say back in the day, maybe somebody like a Tom Cruise or something like that. Just like the short hair from, what was it? Mission Impossible, I think would probably have been like probably the closest match. But, who would I want to play me? I would love to have like Paul Rudd or somebody like that, or Ryan Reynolds. I think both of those guys would be amazing in my role. But in the story that is Jeff and his life. But I have not been either fortunate or cursed to have somebody say, hey, you look like so and so. So I'm gonna be positive and say that's a good thing, but that's just how I'm gonna read into it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, when it changes every couple of years, you're like, okay, well, I guess I can look like whoever I want to look like then.
It's true. Yeah, occasionally I'll grow the facial hair a little bit out for maybe a week or two. I'm fortunate enough to be able to grow a nice beard if I wanted to, but about 2 weeks is my limit before it starts to bother me and it's ready to go.
Yeah, you are. I've always said you've got like a full beard at 5 o'clock. But so get this one. So my brother and I were on a cab in New York City a few years back, and we told the cab driver, we're brothers. And he said, I don't see it. And it's like, really? Why is that? Well, you have facial hair and he doesn't. And it's like,
and you look like Jason Momoa and he doesn't.
You look like Jason Momoa and he looks like Kid Rock. No,
I think that's just the magic of genetics. I mean, I have 4 younger brothers and I don't feel like I look like any of them. I think my middle brother, Alex, is probably the closest one. But if you put like the 4 of us or 5 of us into a room, I think one person would be like, oh, yeah, I can kind of see the resemblance. But the rest of us all look different.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say is like your one brother looks like you with glasses on. But then I was thinking,
That's Alex.
I think the only time I ever see him is like a LinkedIn picture, which is about the size of a penny. You know, so I don't really know what he looks like. I just know he looks like you, kind of.
Yeah, I think, Alex and I have very similar, personalities, interests, things like that. We're definitely probably the most similar looking as well. Although he has shaved his head and I have not yet been that brave to do it. So when he had hair, we definitely looked a lot closer.
Well, you have plenty of hair.
Yeah, I'm doing so far so good. So we'll ride that wagon as long as we can.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
All right, let's go ahead and wrap it up for this week. Chris, hopefully we covered what you were looking for. If not, I'm sure you'll tweet at us. If you got other topics out there and you're listening, feel free to drop them into a tweet at IDAC Podcast or send us a message on LinkedIn. We will be at Gartner again the week of August 22nd. If you've got a spot that we can podcast from, so we're not homeless podcasters in the halls of Gartner, that would be great. Sync up with us. We'd love to try to figure out a way that we can maybe share some space with somebody. And I think that'll do it for us.
I got one more thing. I got one more thing. Good news is next week we're going back to having guests. Now we don't have guests lined up for like the next, few months or whatever. So it could just, work its way back to Jim and Jeff. But there's so much interest in being on the show, and I don't think it's going to be that hard to fill. But next week we're going to have our friend Robert Snodgrass on, talk about state and municipal IM and citizen IM. So pretty excited about that. I mean, he's super knowledgeable in that area.
Yeah, for sure. That'll be a good one. I always hate to put next week because we never know what the schedule will put out there. But if it's not next week, it'll be an upcoming episode. So that's how I will caveat that. How about that?
I'm good with that. That's your asterisk.
Yeah, it's coming up. We're just working on calendaring and scheduling, all the good stuff. All right, we'll go ahead and leave it there. We're on the web, identityatthecenter.com. We're on Twitter at IDAC Podcasts. If you'll be at Gartner, ping us. We'd love to do a fist bump or something. And with that, we'll go ahead and leave it for this week. Thanks all for listening, and we'll talk with you all in the next one. Thanks for listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and visit us on the web at identityatthecenter.com.